illustrious panel. We're very pleased to have them here, and just want to thank them for being here. We can have a quick round of applause to show our appreciation. We can't do this work without each other. So the value that we have in this room is pretty immense, and I hope we can all bring forward all of the things that we've learned during this conference into our work in the coming year. And with that, I just want to let you know I have questions are all in front of you in case it's easier for you to read than to just hear it auditorially. What else?
Introductions.
Yes, introductions. Okay. I'm going to just do quickly. I'm Alex Rounds. I'm with First 5 Mendocino. I'd like you guys to go ahead and introduce yourselves if you'd like.
I'm Gaelin, Elmore. You guys had to listen to me, didn't get to, but you had to listen to me earlier. Excited to be here.
And I'm Erica Dunnies. I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner in the community.
And I'm Bob Sege. I'm a pediatrician from Boston, and I got to listen to Gaelin.
I'm Brian Williams. I'm the CEO of Weaving Wellness and Diversity Management, a nonprofit that is working with First 5.
I'm Ben Anderson. I had the privilege of getting to listen to Gaelin and Dr. Sege earlier. I'm a commissioner for First 5, and I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. My day job is I'm the behavioral health director for Mendocino Community Health Clinics.
So we have a wealth of knowledge here, and we're going to start with like a question directed kind of at one of you, and then I'd like to open up so you can all share your thoughts and maybe have a little bit more of a discussion. How's that sound? All right, well, I want to start with Gaelin. And you've shared a little bit about this already. We appreciate how forthright and talking about your experiences you've been. And in a lot of our talks today, we talk about our personal experiences, positive experiences, and really moving towards a more strengths-based focus. So what we're wondering is what you might want to share with us about how that strength-based lens has impacted maybe not just you, but the people around you, your family, other people in your life.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think really how I look at the strength-based lens is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset for other people, right? Like the growth versus fixed mindset we talk about, or it's gained a lot of steam. But in particular, I think the strengths-based lens allows us to see other people for their potential, not the decisions that they've made. And a lot of times we're humans, we're dealing with the emotions that go with what's in front of us right now, the way that someone might be, some kid that might be pushing your buttons or making fun of your salary. I'm not pointing my finger at anybody. But seeing them for their strength and not seeing them for their deficiencies. So the one thing I think I benefited from specifically is that a lot of my strengths were very out there, very straightforward. So when I had to do classwork when I was going through traumatic and hard things, people saw that I was a gifted student or a speaker, and they were very easily noticeable. Even in high school, realistically, my coach had a relationship with me because I was a star athlete. And so those strengths, it was easy for people to see me through that lens. However, what I am most passionate about in my work and why I do it is, what about the kids whose gifts are not as easily noticed? What about the ones that aren't coveted in our society? Or you have to just dig a little deeper to understand, like, okay, you are really argumentative. You are good at formulating opinions and articulating them to other people. We don't see that as a skill, but how can we, through that strength-based lens, use that to influence the work we're doing with people? And in a negative way, I saw that with my own biological father. My dad was a man who was extremely gifted with young children and developing, cultivating education, things like that. He was very passionate about it. But because of being a male, because of not being extremely educated himself, he got the stigma of he always thought in his life, I can't work with young children. I can't, and so he saw it in this way until he became a very active grandfather and realized hey, Dad, you're actually really good at this. And so it changed his perspective and his lens, where that was a skill in his life that didn't get cultivated, wasn't a strength that people saw value in. So I saw it directly within my own family of how I benefited versus how someone else did it.
I love that. That reminds me of one of my kids has some really argumentative characteristics. And I always thought, okay, this is a real pain as a parent, but for the world, we need that. We need people who are going to go out and question things. Anyone else want to add to what Gaelin said? Go ahead.
So part of my career, I was a child abuse pediatrician. As a child abuse pediatrician, we get called when someone on the staff thinks a child may have been injured or otherwise hurt through abuse or maltreatment. And then learning about this, at first, I was really young and I got kind of angry because how can you do that to your kid? And then I remember the moment when I saw this dad who had hurt his child, and the child was in the intensive care unit, and the dad was sitting in a chair, folded up in a fetal position, kind of silently crying, barely responsive. And when the police came by to arrest him, I'm not even sure he noticed. And then I realized that here was a man who was a war veteran, who had lost his job, who was in a position where his wife was the breadwinner and they had 2 under 2, and he just lost it, and his life was forever changed. And then I realized that what really we need to do is understand where people come from, and that the horrible things that happen are the result of people who are human reaching their breaking point, not because they're evil, although a couple of those, but mostly not. Mostly other things that break down. And I think that really inspired me to develop the work we're doing now to help support families doing what they want to do, so I never have to see a parent kind of curled up on themselves crying.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on moving towards this strength-based lens?
I think some of it too is, like, I work with a lot of people with trauma histories, and if you don't understand that these symptoms that you're experiencing are a normal, predictable response to having survived abnormal circumstances, you think you're broken or defective or something's wrong with you. And so helping them understand that it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. And then as far as when we get better, I always kind of joke that my goal isn't to be your therapist for the next 3-5 years. My goal is that you're going to fire me because you don't need me anymore. So how are we going to know when we get there? So not what's the matter with you, but what matters to you? And then what's getting in the way of that? How can we overcome that?
That's really great. Now it connects to like the community resiliency model and how we can learn that our responses are biological. They're not things we control, but we can learn to manage them by working with people like you.
Right.
Thank you. My next question is going to be directed first at Dr. Sege. One of our staff was wondering if any of your studies have looked at how hope works and what might be different for families or children who have either a neurodivergent or have any special needs, and what, if there's any difference that you see or have seen through studies.
Yeah. So first of all, this is going to be more observational than stories, because I don't know about studies. The whole issue of positive childhood experiences is pretty new, so there's a lot of work still to be done, and this is definitely an area. But we do know that when you talk about the building blocks, people engage in them in different ways, so that sometimes it's verbal, telling stories, sometimes it's art, sometimes it's just being out in nature where you can experience the stimulation, the wind, the smell, the sound, all of those things in a calm environment. What we do know, though, is that kids are like people. Actually, are people, sorry. So you hear stories about a shy young person who gets evaluated for having a communications disorder or whatever, and she's just shy. And it's okay to be introverted. And it's okay to be neurodivergent in so many ways. And so many times the issue that professionals face is what kind of label can we put on this so we can apply a therapy. But other times it may be just be how we make the world broader so that people can be engaged, have those relationships, and they're quirky people with strengths and weaknesses like everybody else. And then specifically with autistic children, there's a lot of work being done now that shows that carefully teaching children language actually causes changes in the brain, even in kids who are pretty severely linguistically and language impaired through autism. So one of the things that we can absolutely apply what we now know about the effects of positive childhood experiences is how to structure learning in a way that meets the needs of neurodivergent kids so they can maybe not be a speaker like you, but be able to speak and to do all those things and to understand that all of us have that brain plasticity that allows us to grow at any stage. And I think that's a really important lesson that we're learning from neuroscience, that there are ways, and there are ways you can structure teaching and training and learning to bring out that brain plasticity.
Thank you. If anyone else wants to jump in, feel free, otherwise we'll go on to the next question. I think you answered that very, very nicely, so thank you. So Brian, I'm going to ask if you, I know you've talked with us before about how our lives can be fuller through community engagement, through working with, doing our day jobs, but also having a place in our community. And one of the building blocks of hope is having a, social engagement piece. In your community, in our communities, in our collective communities, what are some ways that we all might get involved and do more outside of our 9-to-5s?
That's a good question. So I think the best way that I would like everyone to leave the room and think about the communities is that we are all a part of one community. And we have little subsections that we have sort of systemically built in differences, right, based off of cultural beliefs and skin color and hair color and, heights or whatever, meaning young kids and adults. Basically, I would just kind of like to start fresh and say, like, it's a matter of being human. It's a matter of treating everybody as a human. Yes, you want to be involved in the community, and I think that we hide behind those subsections a lot of times where we feel like that's the native big time, I'm just going to let them do their thing and support them. But in reality, we need to get to a better spot. We really do need to get to a space where you feel comfortable coming to the big time and just feeling like a human who enjoys music, a human who enjoys good food, because that's really where we need to be. And by the way, there is a big time. Starting tonight, first dance starts at 6 o'clock. Please come, enjoy, listen to our we call it our teachings and we call it our healing. That's our medicine, but we do these things for our community, and that includes anybody in our community, not just our native community. So I want to open that up for us just to take away those barriers that we are taught from children and just see a human being who needs help or who needs the same things you need. They need love, they need attention, they need food, they need water, and that's all we need to become healthy humans.
Fantastic.
Where's the big time?
That's my own question.
Oh, yeah.
Big time, and how late can we go there?
The big time, natives love to party. We'll be there pretty much all night. I think we're going to try to wrap it up tonight around 10. So we only have a few dancing groups today. Tomorrow is all day, starting probably around 10 until evening. So, and we'll have food provided. The address, if you want to put it in your phones, is 3250 Road I. That's in Redwood Valley. It's about 10 minutes from here. Don't let the back roads scare you. It's not that far out there. Or you just roll your windows down and follow the drum sounds. That'll work too. But yeah, we'd love to have everybody. We really are promoting it. We're getting back to our normal selves here with getting our medicine out there and sharing space with one another and being social. That's what being a human is, in my opinion.
I like those universals, music and food. What can't you do with those
Exactly.
things, Thank you. And I want to ask too, like, going out and doing those things, like, we can feel a change in our bodies when we're going to social events.
Yeah.
What happens, and what do you notice, or what do we all notice when we get to go out to these public events where we see people, where we have fun, or we eat and have music and dance?
That's a great, awesome follow-up question, and I'm sure very educated people know the science behind it. I know a little, but yeah, there actually is some wonderful research out there now that shows that our teachings and our medicine is equal to the magic pills that are out there to balance those chemicals in the brain, release the certain chemicals in the brain that make us happy, that make us feel loved. They're very much similar to those things. Or going to a therapist or whatever you find to be mindful or help you out mentally. It's the same release. But if anybody else wants to chime in.
Yeah, there's a hormone that we have called oxytocin, and it's, when I went to medical school, it's known to help women go into labor and breastfeed, all those things. But it turns out it's released when we fall in love, and when we hear music and we're with other people, and all of those things, and it changes our brains. And can I tell a funny story?
Please.
Okay. So there have been a few papers about oxytocin release in fathers and other non-gestational parents, like when a baby is born and they're all really excited and happy, and this stuff is released and the brains change and all that stuff. So we were talking with some of our staff, most of whom are younger than me, and they said, "Oh," I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's where dad jokes come from."
Reaching a new level.
But the point of that, besides the joke, is there really are changes that happen to us that can be long-lasting and help us establish those beneficial brain patterns.
Another shout out to oxytocin, midwife by training.
Oh,
so.
there you go.
Nice.
So thank you. Now, Ben, I'm going to ask this one to you. When we consider the importance of relationships, belongings, oh my goodness, it's better when I don't try to read. When we think about the importance of relationships, belonging, attachment, and hope, can you offer examples of how, when we're working with families, what we can do to help build rapport? Sometimes we don't have very much time, and what might be, aid us in our efforts?
Sure, thanks. I think the first thing that comes to mind with that question is that any kind of therapeutic relationship, first and foremost, is a real relationship between two real people. And what the research bears out is 50% or more of whether somebody finds benefit from therapy is the relationship with the therapist, not the modality that's used, whether it's CBT or EMDR or whatever. So I think trying to make that real connection, and if we're going to be there and be present with people, and help them co-regulate, we have to be regulated. So I know I work in a medical clinic, and oftentimes it's back-to-back, and you're rushing, and you're thinking about all the paperwork you have to do. And so sometimes, and I'm sure Erica can relate to this too, sometimes you just have to stop and take a breath and get yourself regulated so that you can be fully present with the family or the individual that you're working with.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Would you like to add anything?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is the most important aspect of my profession as a pediatric NP, working with patients and families all day, every day, and on acute problems or managing illnesses that are going to last a lifetime. We're going to have a lot more success if we get along and if I understand the family and the patient well. One thing that I learned by an example of a pediatrician that I worked with when I first came to the county was to start the visit just by sitting down and having a conversation about the fun stuff. Just even in the first 30 seconds, or maybe it carries on for a few minutes. What kinds of shoes he's wearing, or, favorite baseball team, or just what the child is up to, whatever it is. And it just really can start the visit off on a great foot with smiles on all the faces, and then diving into the issue. And I found that parents don't have a problem with that. Even if their kid came in for an ear infection, but you're talking about the baseball game yesterday, they're happy that you're, building a relationship first and then diving into how to help their kid get better. Yeah.
You can see that being very hope-related. It's like without going into, having to ask the specific questions, just being a real, present human being.
Yeah.
That's interested, like realistically and authentically interested in what's going on. So, thank you. Anything else?
So there's a story from when I was a kid in the elementary school that was impactful that I walked to school to. There was a time so the teacher that ended up reporting when I was missing during that time, I was in her class during this specific story. And it was one of the times where I overslept the previous days and had to experience the abuse that came with that. And the whole day I was watching the clock and thinking about where I would be in class if I were at school right now, how much that the day is probably better without me there. Like, I'm not interrupting during certain class periods. I'm like, well, does the person sitting next to me, are they happy that I'm not there? Just all these negative thoughts, these intrusive thoughts that are confirming the bad of what I'm going through in that moment. And so when I eventually got to go to school the next day, and I was upset because all those thoughts that were coming up were like, in my head, they were fact, they were true. And so on the way to school, I'm like, I'm not talking to anybody on the bus. I'm not in a mood to joke or laugh or be myself. And I'm committed to having a bad day. You may not have been 9 years old, but you've had days where you've kind of been committed to having a bad day. And I walked into class, and this teacher, her name was Miss Tully then, she wasn't married yet. I walked into the class, didn't say anything to anybody, and she was on the other side of the room working with a student, and she just stopped, and she was just like, hey Gaelin, so glad you're here today, we missed your presence yesterday. And there was just this moment of, like, the sky parted, all of the darkness, and like how committed I was to having a bad day just it disappeared. And it was because there was this intentional effort to be compassionate, to see me and maybe she would have did that to any kid. Again, it doesn't matter if you do this like on a cycle where this is kind of my routine when certain things happen in your work, but it's like, how is this commitment to compassion, like we talked about, going to show up in moments where like the norm or routine has changed? And that allows you to build rapport, that allows you to solidify relationships. And that day I was able to have a great day, but that is also a building block, because I'm really young, new to her class, a building block in our relationship where it built to a point where, oh, I'm going to tell you about the abuse that I'm experiencing because I've seen you show up in these different points in life. And so that's a story that will always stick to me about the ways that we can show up as we're trying to build that rapport as professionals with people that might be going through hard things. So, yeah.
All right. Well, Erica, we're going to start with you this time.
Okay.
I am a big fan of the warm handoff, and I know I've seen you do it. And I don't know how familiar everyone is on what warm handoffs are, so I'd like just if you could take a moment to explain what a warm handoff is, what it looks like, and why you might think it's important.
Sure. On my way here, I was thinking of like a social example of a warm handoff, because a lot of mine is in the clinical setting, but even socially, it might be like you're at a party and there's a few of you there, right? We've got, let's say, Alex, Gaelin, and Erica, and I haven't met Gaelin. Alex would say, Erica, this is Gaelin. You both are very passionate about child health. I'm going to go step away and get some appetizers. Enjoy each other's company, right? So that just sort of introduction by the third party so that you guys can carry on and already have a piece to connect on or know what the goal is. So yeah, in clinical practice, this is usually my connecting families with other sources of care or resources. For example, connecting a family or child with a therapist. Ideally, if I saw a need for a child to begin therapy, I might have a pod or a team of therapists in an office where I could bring the therapist over to my exam room and introduce the therapist to the child and give them some time to build rapport and engage and maybe briefly discuss what they're seeking therapy for or not, right? Because we know it might just be important to get to know each other on the fun level. But what it looks like in reality is a lot of phone calls or emails. A lot of times let's talk about lactation specifically. There's a wonderful hotline in the community, 855-855-MILK. And I'll sit in the patient exam room with the family, and we'll call from the mom's phone so that they can make that first connection with the lactation hotline while I'm there with them, instead of giving them the number on a piece of paper and sending them home to do it with a newborn baby, and yeah, a million things to do. And so that helps to relieve that anticipatory anxiety of making that first connection. And sometimes they leave a voicemail, but they still feel better that they've made the connection and they're now expecting a call back. But yeah, a lot of times it is a bit of a process, actually. It's not as simple as the social example I gave where we're all in the same room, but it's really important to me to make sure that my patients connect with the resource.
Yeah, those are so important. It just makes it so much easier, like, to already have an idea. Oh, I'm going to call this number. They're going to be here, and they'll call you back if they don't. You know, just having like that, those little pieces put together, makes people so much more comfortable.
Good question.
Is that a free resource?
Yeah.
Okay.
The phone rings in my purse.
That's what that was, though. Okay, I see. I'm catching on. I'm slow, but.
So we all do a lot in this community, so some of us, many of us, most of us probably wear more than a few hats. So again, hat tip to all of us. I don't think I have this. Oh, no, okay. We're going to go kind of broad so everyone can answer this, what feels, appropriate or what your knowledge is. And Dr. Sege, you're going to be most familiar because this is a hope question. But as we're bringing hope into our community, the framework, what are the ways that we can all see that coming into our work? And are there any challenges that you might see in trying to bring hope? And then what might our solutions be? Sorry, so kind of a long question. Anyone?
Nick, I saw you flinch.
Yeah, I mean, I talk too much, so you guys got to help me out so I don't talk all the time. I think what is important, and we just talked about like community engagement, social engagement, community engagement, and I think it's important that piece and maybe I haven't been doing like the whole framework or using the whole building blocks as I partnered with community schools, things like that. But I think the hardest thing is to get people to understand the commitment to these things are important for you as an individual, but also the people you're serving, right? So it's not like we can't just solely be motivated to be socially engaged and engaging in community because we think, oh, it's going to help this person that I'm serving. You have to see the value in the work that you're in the ways that you engage with your community. You have to see the direct return on that investment for you, because if we aren't believing in it individually, we're not believing in it within an organization and as a leader amongst First Five, like Dr. Sege was talking about earlier. If you're not believing it there, then it's not going to trickle its way down to the people on the receiving end of the work that we're doing. So that's probably been the most challenging aspect for me, is because we're so wired to think, how are we best serving these people? We want to get resources, we want to get tangible ways to apply it and get moving and serving others. But first, we have to buy into it for ourselves. If you believe that those things are important for you and those that you're serving, then you're more likely to be driven toward that in your work, instead of just saying oh, this is something unique that they need. So that's been the biggest hurdle in my work in partnering with communities is, first I have to fix this fallacy that they believe I'm only doing this because it benefits them. When the reality is, the more people understand it benefits everybody and that's why we should do it, then we'll see it sustainable within communities and organizations. So that's the biggest challenge I see.
Thanks. I think that there's two answers to that. So first one is professional community, and that is who here is not busy at work? Okay. So one of the barriers is everyone who works in human services of any kind. I don't, maybe financial people are busy too, who knows, I don't know. But we're really, really busy. So one of the hurdles is getting the idea that the work of hope is the training, and it's not great rocket science, but it's turning that switch in our minds so that we train ourselves to see strengths and sources of stamina as readily as we see the deficits. And to get the systems we work in to see that it's a worthwhile expenditure of the direct service time to look for, identify, honor, and promote positive experiences to the same extent that it's worthwhile screening for deficits. And that even when you screen for deficits, some of the things that are prescribed, I'm a doctor, I can say that, really are community engagement, like, I don't know, is there anything going on tonight? But to look at those things, because those, if you think back to your own childhood, I think back to mine, some of those events, people get together for different celebrations, that's when you get to know your cousins and all those things. Those really create important memories, and it's those informal networks that are often the go-to place for people in addition to the formal things. Okay, so now I had time to prepare, so I got two other things to say. So we all talk a lot about equity, and people who are impoverished, economically impoverished, have difficulty accessing some of the building blocks, and that's a really, really important issue. But I want to put out there that there's another issue, and that is that for another group of families, they're so concerned and hyper-vigilant about their children. They don't give them the room for child-centered play, for exploring things, for failing and learning from that. So, you know, I tell, Boston's it's a baseball town, and it turns out that Major League Baseball players who get a hit 1 out of 3 times at bat are superstars, right? So that means that in the process of becoming a superstar, they've had to become comfortable with failing 2 out of 3 times. And often parents will try to protect their children from failing, protect their children from frustration, schedule them for times for adults to help them with things, when children actually need that, and they need time to explore nature, they need time to skin their knees, not break the bones, they need time for that social interaction. So I think that the building blocks of hope, once you understand that, it helps you. Okay, and the third thing that is a real barrier is the feeling, the understanding that all of our children are all of our children and they're all of our future. And so creating artificial barriers for some kids to have access to activities and other kids to not benefit from the diversity of the community they live in is really a disservice to our children that will have long-term implications. So other than that, it's all perfect. But that was a little bit negative. I think the positive thing is here we are. We go around the country, we talk to all kinds of people. This approach really, really resonates with so many people from so many different cultures. And I think that we get it. And we're really starting to change culturally and do it. And I think it's just an amazing time to be alive now.
Appreciate that. I especially appreciate the opportunity for children to fail. And I'm going to have to give my husband some props, because he was the guy who didn't let the kids win at any games, no matter how many times they lost. While I was like, okay, here's the double purple for Candyland. They've done really well. And went with his model. They had more fun that way too.
I just want to add one little thing to that amazing responses. And just kind of like a change in thought process, and that's just in the room, raise your hand if you have a caseload. Go ahead, everybody can raise their hand. Everybody has a caseload, right? Keep your hands up if you think you have a caseload. Notice I said think now. Yeah, you don't have a caseload. You have a family. Imagine all your clients being a grandmother. And would you allow certain things to slip through the cracks, certain things to not get done if that was your grandmother? Right? I think if we approach everybody in that way, also I use a grandmother because when I'm speaking to my grandmother, I'm trying to learn. If I ask my grandmother something, I'm listening it very sincerely, and I'm trying to pick something out and learn something so that I can pass it on to my kids, right? And I feel like if we do that with our clients, our caseload, we can be a better person the next day and carry that over to different families. And then that's cross-cultural because we're also working with different cultures every day. So.
Thank you.
Can I ask?
Yeah,
Expand on
please.
this?
Come on, do you want a microphone?
No, I'm good. I was just going to say, I'm curious about anyone here. So I work at NCO and I'm very entry-level extra help, and then now I'm moved up into project management. And in my 3.5 years, I would say I have some form of framework fatigue where it's like, now we're doing this, and now the county's doing this, and now we're all doing this. And I'm just curious about that challenge because so many of those frameworks I've been introduced to in my organization have frankly come top down with really, really good intentions. And I'm curious how you've seen, because I heard your presentation, I was like, I'm ready to bring it to NCO, it's great. But how have you seen it be really community-centered, community-focused, so that there isn't in 2 years, now we're going to have to learn something new to integrate in our community? I don't know if anyone else feels like that. But,
So the late, great Carl Bell, a psychiatrist in Chicago, said that models are like toothbrushes.
yeah, right.
Everybody has one. Everybody wants everyone else to have one. But at the end of the day, everyone only wants to use their own. So with that in mind, you notice today I started out with talking about all the other positive models, and I think that what we're doing very intentionally is setting up the framework because these are the kinds of experiences that children need to have. And then you can fill in the kinds of what does relationship mean in your community? Is a family mom and baby? Is a family mom, dad, baby, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever, right? So it means a lot of things, different people, and that's great. And we're now working as we're going towards having a more formal understanding of what hope-informed care is. We're working with organizations like CSSP so that there'll be strengthening families with hope. And we're working with the basics, so there'll be the basics with hope. And we're gradually trying to do that so that we are not saying it's this framework or that, but it's there's this core thing about the strengths, and we view hope as being from the child's eyes. These are what the experiences the child needs to have. And strengthening families looks at what does a strong family look like? And if you think about it, if children grow up in a strong family, they're more likely to have those positive childhood experiences, no conflict. And programs like the Basics and Essentials for Childhood tend to look a little more at more of a community social norm construct. So what is the social construct that helps families be strong so that children can have those positive experiences? So we try to work with people where they are within their frameworks. When we do our Hope Innovation Network, which is kind of our innovation lab, we specifically include organizations in different sectors with different job requirements and let them talk to each other and work out what it means in there, so that we don't own hope, we didn't invent it, but it's a framework so that you can stick the other things you're doing in and identify, is the work we're doing helping the child have these experiences that they need? And does that model or approach or whatever it is we're buying today, does that help the child have those experiences? So we're working that, and it is so fun because we get to collaborate and cooperate with all kinds of people. So I was in the office of a political scientist the other day and a neuroscientist, but I spend most of my time in places like this with people who are doing direct services, and we're all going for the same thing, really understanding what promotes optimal child development. And we've chosen the framework so it's not jargony, it's simple, it's straightforward, and it builds on all of the training people already have. So it's not hope or trauma-informed care. It's like, oh, trauma-informed care, and you also add the strengths to it. How cool is that? So we're working really hard to avoid making more work or more conflicts when they don't actually exist.
There's a lot of overlap in so many of the things that we're doing, and they build on each other to make improvements that can have, like, reverberate through all our systems and just keep it going. Like, we all have CQI to do in our work, and this is just like a layer of that, you know, to keep moving forward. And honestly, I think when we bring hope and attachment to our work, like, we can all enjoy it more. Because we're connecting too. So it's not a one-way street where we're going and giving. This is for all the people, like you were saying earlier. This is for all of us. When we connect through our work, when we connect with the people, you know, in our communities, we all do better. So that's what I like about hope and everything else we learned through this conference so far.
Alex, I'd just like to add to that, and to your point, is that I think it's a braiding, right? I don't think it's like, it's not a scaffolding, it's not one or the other, they're really intertwined, and that's how we see it with the Model Training Program, that's how we see the Community Resiliency Model, that's how we see it with Tina Bryson's message of safe, seen, secure, you know, and same with the Hope Model. They're all braided, and they're all interwoven, so it makes a complete fabric that could all envelop the whole community. That's how I kind of see it.
Is hope like the toothpaste then?
Yeah.
It can be shared.
It can be, yeah, it's like the toothpaste. I totally love that.
Awesome.
Once it gets out the tube, you can't get it back in. Once it's out, it's out. You got to use it.
Oh, I think that if Carl was still alive, he would love that comment.
That's awesome.
I have a thought. Just as we were talking through this concept, and you know, a lot of my past 3 years or so was trauma-informed care and kind of these universal precautions around trauma, and now hearing about this emphasis of strengths-based programs, positivity, hope. I can imagine that as we weave more of this into our work as direct service providers, that we might see a decrease or some improvement in vicarious trauma that we experience. So yeah, I hope that's the case, and I wonder who's looking at that.
Yeah. And in answer to your last question, who's looking at it, anyone is a big funder. we really,
Love to. Pockets.
I would really like to look at that, because I think it's exactly right that burnout is, part of it is moral hazard.
Yeah.
And part of it is that we all go into this work because we're empathetic, we're warm, and we love people, and then you go and you have to do all these things where you transform people into problems, and that takes a toll. And I think that one of the benefits for providers is when I started doing this, I began to see things to admire, and almost all the families I cared for, even if they had big problems, they also had gone through a lot and had figured it out, and it changed myself, because learning to admire people and understand what's going on is really very profoundly different as a provider.
Thank you. Any other questions from the table? Lisa?
Jumping off of that, you know, we all work within broken systems. And what has come to me in this is thinking about how to find the strengths in broken systems in the same way we find strengths in broken people. And, you know, I hope that can happen. When you talk about, in thinking about inequity and creating a drive toward just policy, how can we think about that? How do we think about our impact on policies within broken systems? Give us some advice.
Commissioner.
I'll start. So I think one of the things we can do is we can advocate and we can vote. And so like one of the challenges we have in rural Mendocino and Lake counties is access to services. And so during the COVID pandemic, all of a sudden the rules changed. You know, you could do telephone appointments or telehealth visits, and that was all very, very temporary. And in the FQHC world, we could hire unlicensed therapists that were, you know, post-grad school working on their hours for licensure. And so, you know, one of my other roles is I'm a co-chair for the Behavioral Health Peer Network for the California Primary Care Association. We did a lot of advocacy with Senator Wiener's office out of San Francisco and others to get those temporary flexibilities extended and made permanent so that it helps with access to services. So advocating and voting are two ways we can do that. And going back to the comment earlier about a broken system, the medical model, in order for an agency to get reimbursed, you have to have a diagnosis. You have to label it. And for some systems of care, like the outpatient specialty mental health model of care, you have to have significant impairments in multiple areas of functioning. So if you're broken enough, you can get support. So some of the things that are changing, at least with state law, are surrounding now you can get services if you've experienced trauma. You don't have to have symptoms and impairments in functioning. So getting away from that fail first model into a strengths-based support you so that you don't get to that place.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. And I know Gaelin has a flight to catch, so I just want to say really thank you for being here. You brought so much, and we really appreciate all that you shared. If we can have a quick round of applause, or maybe not so quick.
Not that there's a surplus out there of questions, but if there is like one or two that you might have, I can answer them quick and then I'll go. I just didn't want to abruptly leave. Thank you for the applause, but totally unnecessary. Thank you for the work that you're doing, for the commitment to show up, to grow in competency and the best way to serve Mendocino County. Thank you all for what you do. So, if there are any questions, I'll answer them. If there aren't any, I'll leave. That's okay. I won't take it personal.
Where is your next speaking engagement?
When?
Where?
Oh, it's in Minneapolis. Luckily, I don't have to leave home. So it's with an association for residential communities next week in Minneapolis. Really excited. Great people there, just like here. But yeah. Thank you.
We are planning to bring him back.
That's what they say. You guys heard it. They just said it publicly. So that's contractually binding. I will see you guys next year. Yes.
If an agency wanted you to come speak, how would they contact you?
Yeah, just in the packet, my contact information is on there. If you send me email, I'm really responsive. If you want to bypass my email, the QR code goes directly to my calendar. If you want to throw a time on my schedule and we just chat, just give me a little information about where we connected, what we might chat about. But that's a bypass, like the going back and forth in email. It's an active calendar link, so if you want to connect that way, we absolutely can.
Great,
thank you. Thanks for the plug. All right, thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you all.
All right, well, that was fun. I'm going to get the mic down because they make me uncomfortable. All right, so before I go back to our question,
Yeah.
What do you have?
Here's what I have. This has kind of been coming up for me all school year as we've kind of been talking about trauma and stuff, and I'm wondering, how do we get strength-based support into our schools? I feel like even students don't talk about their trauma, and there's no space, there's no class that says, in English, we're going to journal about this, and it's going to be private, and trauma looks different for everybody. So for me, it's like, all right, we're now in this place of we're recognizing it, we're coming off of COVID, we've had a lot of learning loss, nobody's talking about the testing anxiety that's out there, or if you don't have an IEP, you don't really qualify for those modifications. So you can retake the test as many times as you need to, but so I'm seeing that as, in our school communities, wow, what can we bring in to help our students that way?
Well, we can bring them into the HOPE framework.
Yes.
Bring the HOPE framework to them. One of the things, I'll answer this or take my 2 cents here, that one of the things that First 5 does is we teach the community resiliency model to community partners, which can include schools. That is just one layer of like a practical, easy way that teachers can bring more strength-based focus and more regulatory tools to their classrooms. So that's one thing that we can do, and we will continue to invite our school districts and our schools administrators to trainings like this. I know it's not always easy to get away from the school schedule, But there are opportunities that we can build together. Any other?
Just a shout out to school teachers. When we talk about, and today we did this thing, imagine somebody who, had traumatic childhood is doing okay as an adult. I can't tell you how many times the person who made the difference is a school teacher. And we heard that from Gaelin. I can mention a few teachers, or one teacher in particular, who got me thinking maybe I could do science, or no, actually, that was a fun thing to do, despite the other teachers who tried to make it as boring as possible. But I think that all of those things, that honoring what people already do is really the first place to start. Many teachers in many schools provide a safe environment for kids to live and learn and explore. And some school districts are many already working hard to create these positive school environments. So always, going back to the other question of broken systems, look at how effective this system already is for so many people who've experienced trauma, even though there's a lot more to be done. And you mentioned like 3 things that could be done. But I always start out with what a powerful force for childhood schools can be, and how many people have experienced trauma. A turning point was a teacher who cared about them. And you can start there and then move on to all those things. And I think that always is more honest and more effective than saying, we know the answer to your broken system. Or even my own broken system in medicine. We won't go there because that would lead down a path. But does that help at all to think about it that way?
Yeah. I think, we talk about patient-centered care or client-centered care or point of service care, and I do think that when we focus there, that's where our best efforts lie, for sure. Whether it's policy or direct service, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're playing a lot with that language in various ways. So we're thinking about goal-directed care that's responsive, respectful, and purposeful. Because often the reaching agreement on the goal is not the hard part. Like, people want their kids to succeed in school. They want this or that, but then everything breaks down after that. So keeping the outcome in mind, and then working on the outputs, right? Like, the outcome is an educated person, and the output might be passing a test, right? So if you keep your mind focused on what the mutual outcome is, it's often you can figure things out. And it's hard, and it takes hard work, and it takes a level of humility.
And persistence.
Yeah. Yes, persistence over and over again.
Over and over again.
And I would just add, I think, one of the things I always I tell kids is, you're the expert on you. You've known you your whole life, you've lived in your body your whole life, and so asking the kids, what do they need? Because they may come up with a solution on their own, and that can be very empowering. Whether it's a group after school that somebody else could help facilitate, or an app, I don't know, but asking them what they need.
I had a thought for the question related to schools. Before I was a nurse practitioner, I did school-based health promotion, mostly for children with obesity, or to prevent child obesity in a rural area. And the schools that were most successful were those who had one teacher that was incredibly passionate about the subject and was the champion. So I think identifying that champion, somebody that you could partner with, and then, make a beautiful example of it, and then other teachers start to ask, what are you doing? How is it working? And to let that kind of catch fire and spread.
And also, I think that question, there's a lot more, some political aspects to it, right? Like, we got to definitely, as a group here, there's a lot of people here, there's a lot of voices, sort of advocate for what you're hearing your students say. But that comes again from listening to them and asking those private questions, and actually being sincere and hearing their words, and empowering their voices, because unfortunately our children a lot of times don't get that level of empowerment. It's up to us as the adults who are helping them. So there's a lot to go in that. I'm sure there's teachers unions out there that can help get your school district in line with some services in the area that are providing those things. And yeah, hopefully that helps.
Appreciate that. That's a good reminder to me to make sure that I block out the time for the school parent-teacher meetings.
Yeah.
I missed the last one. That would have been a good opportunity.
Just one comment, because one of the things that's fun about my job is I talk to all kinds of people. So I talked to the school superintendent, who some parents don't go to parent-teacher conferences. And the school superintendent realized that school was traumatic for some of the parents in his community, and they started finding other places to have the parent-teacher conferences, and in his community was at a library. And the parents were more willing to go there because it didn't rekindle their thoughts. And just that people think out of the box, it's wild. And another school district, they had a social worker who met with the third graders after recess, not every day, but a couple times a semester, and say, what happened during recess? And help the kids do social emotional learning by just processing recess, which is kind of a cool thing because schools have social workers. It wasn't a huge time commitment, but someone thought out of the box. So hearing about those things is just like, oh, maybe that would help. And the insight that for some parents, the reason they don't go to parent-teacher conferences isn't because they don't like them, it's because it's traumatic. And then in our own school district in the suburbs, parent-teacher conferences were during the day, and those of us who worked, it was really hard. And eventually we got the school to ask the teachers to set aside some times that were not during the workday, and that tremendously improved attendance of parents at parent-teacher conferences. So thinking about what is the real problem and how do we get around that can be really helpful. And I think for many of us, we work across systems in different ways, so we can share learnings from one place, because all of us are totally siloed in our jobs.
Thank you. Well, our hour is coming up, and so I want to just give everybody a moment if anyone has any last questions you'd like to bring up.
I would like to ask a question. You guys I keep hearing connect with your kids. I was wondering if you guys have any suggestions for how we might be able to do that with our littles, due to the fact that we're so short-staffed and we're already working with kids that transitions are hard. So, for example, you said, check in with them after recess. We tend to be coming in from recess, and we're going to have 5 or 6 kids that have trouble coming in from recess, and that we need to sit out with those. While we also only have 1 aide and have to stay in ratio.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for that?
But for this school, it wasn't on the teacher. It was a school district had a social worker who wandered around from class to class and found, and so once or twice a semester they would do that, because I think teachers are busy too. So adding to the workload is not realistic. And also I think for the kids, having someone who wasn't their teacher, and I'm only guessing the teacher got a little break then. But to think about who else is in the system, and is there a way to utilize other systems resources without just dumping on the same old people all the time?
I think that, so I used to work with children with autism and some other diagnoses for a very, very long time when I was much younger, and had a lot of energy. And basically what carried me through this very, very long day of sessions, typically 2 hours each, from like 7 in the morning to 7 at night, was the mindset of, because I would go into these homes and see different backgrounds. I would see various financial situations, right? Some better than others. But every single one of them I would treat as, I don't know what it's like in this home when I'm not here. I don't know if it's a caring home. I don't know if it's an abusive home. And I'm probably never going to know. But the one thing I can control is my ability in these 2 hours to give this child the best 2 hours of their day, right? So that carried me a long way and helped with my burnout and fighting that burnout, because it's always there when you're doing this work. Because how am I going to be creative today? Like I gave my all yesterday. And this is a daily thing that I have to do. But with the groups in particular, so I really have strived lately to create mechanisms for peer-to-peer support peer-to-peer learning. So if you can gather and grab one of the kids who's just kind of like, there's always that one kid that the kids just love. The kids just all kind of gravitate towards. Utilizing that child as a model, you know what I mean? And just having them be sort of like maybe even a peer-to-peer tutor, like, look, little Joey's doing an amazing job washing their hands, right? Maybe little Ann doesn't like to wash her hands, but she likes Joey. So she might go over there and be more engaged with this activity now, right? So that's a very specific answer to your question on how to engage these children in a group, right? So hopefully that helps you out.
And I know this is probably the hardest for all of us to do, but also extremely important, which is self-care, right? If we're going to help others, we have to take care of ourselves. Like the classic example of the oxygen mask in the airliner, right? Put your own mask on before you help others. So sometimes the best thing you can do for the kids you work with is figuring out what do I need to be able to take care of me so that I can show up for these kids the next day.
All right, self-care, that's always a good time to come back to. The only reminder, and little things can make a big difference. So we are at an hour, and I want to thank everyone for being willing to come up here and speak to everybody and answer questions. Really appreciate it.